Welcome to the Cybersecurity podcast series. Today we're doing a deep dive into a technology that's really taken off recently, Google's Nano Banana AI. Now, officially, it's known as the Gemini 2.5 Flash image model.
Yeah.
You've probably seen the viral trends, people making 3D figurines of themselves or turning photos into specific art styles. It's powerful, it looks fun, but, and this is the crucial part, it's now a major focus for cybersecurity folks.
It absolutely is. Nano Banana AI, or Gemini 2.5 Flash, it represents a huge jump in, well, how easy it is for anyone to use powerful generative imaging. But like you said, for professionals, for policymakers, the time for just being amazed by the cool pictures is kind of over. Our mission today is very focused. We need to conduct a really thorough security risk assessment here. We have to look past the fun stuff, the aesthetics, and really analyze the high stakes involved when this gets deployed widely. We're talking serious user privacy issues, major challenges for enterprise security teams, and what concrete steps, what mitigation strategies are needed right now.
Okay, so let's get into it. Let's unpack this tech. What's actually running under the hood? What makes this Nano Banana AI so different from the image models we were talking about, say, last year?
Right. Good question. It boils down to architecture and context, really. It's built on Google's Gemini 2.5 Flash image model, and it uses a pretty sophisticated sparse transformer structure. It's called a mixture of experts, or MOE. Think of it less like one giant brain and more like maybe 8 or even 16 highly specialized mini brains all working in concert. This sparsity, this structure allows it to be incredibly fast and efficient.
Okay, so not just faster, but structurally different in how it actually processes information.
Precisely. And that difference, it has immediate security implications. When data gets processed, it might only interact with one or two of those expert submodels, not the entire system. So that speed advantage comes with the potential cost for security auditors. If someone injects, say, proprietary data or some malicious promptware, it might only corrupt or be accessible through one very specific pathway within that MOE structure, which makes detecting data leakage or model poisoning much, much harder to pinpoint during an audit. It's more localized, harder to track down.
That complexity definitely sounds like a challenge. And the other big thing you mentioned was the native multimodal support. Can you explain why that's such a big deal, especially in a security context?
Yeah, this is really key. Most older image models, they basically took text instructions and spat out an image, right? Nano Banana AI is natively multimodal. It doesn't just understand text and images. It can process audio, even video files. And it works with this massive 1 million token context window. Now, that isn't just about having a bigger memory. It lets the AI understand really complex, nuanced instructions because it holds a huge amount of context, visual, textual, whatever, in its active memory during a single session. It's making connections across different types of media in a way older models just couldn't grasp.
Wow. So let me see if I get this right. If I upload like a blurry photo from a trip,
Yeah.
and I ask it to transform the person in the blue shirt into a 1990s Bollywood actress wearing a sari,
Yeah.
and base the style on details from an email I sent yesterday about my favorite movie,
Yeah.
it could actually pull all that together.
That's exactly the kind of sophisticated synthesis it enables. Its real strength comes from tapping into the vast world knowledge of the broader Gemini system it's part of. This is what sets it apart from models that are just focused on, making pretty pictures. It unlocks really advanced uses in things like creative design, marketing, and crucially for our discussion, character consistency preservation. That ability to keep a face or an identity consistent even when you radically change the scene, that's what powers the potential for AI influencers and sophisticated deepfakes.
Right. The character consistency is the big draw for marketing for commercial use, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's also the security nightmare waiting to happen.
It really is. The model is exceptionally good at keeping those core visual elements faces, specific features stable across dozens, even hundreds, of edits. Now, if you're a brand manager creating a campaign with a consistent character, that's fantastic, and valuable even. But if you're a malicious actor, it means you can create a seamless, highly believable fake identity or scenario. You can change the context, the clothes, the background, everything except the core biometric signature of the person you're targeting. It makes the fake much harder to dismiss.
So to try and counter this, Google introduced a defense, right? This Watermarking system. What's the story there? How effective is it supposed to be?
Yes. The idea is to embed invisible digital watermarks directly into any content the AI generates or even just edits. Theoretically, these watermarks are designed to be pretty robust. They're meant to survive common image modifications, things like cropping, adding filters, heavy compression, basic color tweaks. The goal is laudable, obviously. Provide a way to trace content provenance, identify what's AI generated. That's crucial in fighting disinformation.
But I'm sensing a but here. The security analysis isn't quite convinced it's a foolproof solution.
Not at all. Not by a long shot. Independent security analysis raises some pretty serious concerns about its actual practical effectiveness in the wild. Look, if an attacker understands the cryptographic methods being used, it's often possible to develop specific adversarial attacks. Attacks designed explicitly to remove the watermark, or maybe even overwrite it with a fake one. Plus, even if the watermark stays put, watermarking by itself doesn't automatically solve tricky legal issues like admissibility in court. If the watermark can be technically altered or maybe defeated by some simple but maybe unconventional filter, well, that complicates efforts by policymakers who want to enforce mandatory labeling of AI content. So yes, it offers some protection, but think of it more like a speed bump. Maybe a significant one, but definitely not an impenetrable wall against determined attackers.
That really sets the scene for the risks involved here. Powerful tech, but with flaws, maybe significant ones. Before we really dive into those vulnerabilities, especially how this impacts businesses, just a quick note. For those of you listening who are grappling with how to bring AI into your organization safely, or maybe just looking to strengthen your cyber defenses against these fast-moving threats, you really need expertise that understands this specific intersection. The data, the policies, the underlying tech like MOE models, the compliance maze. You need a guide. So we recommend you get connected with Sudhakar Kakinada on LinkedIn for a quick chat on how we can help you enhance your organization's cybersecurity to the next level of robustness. It's really about getting ahead of the curve with strategy, not just reacting when something goes wrong.
Absolutely. And with that need for proactive strategy firmly in mind, let's pivot to the most immediate threats, starting where users often let their guard down the most: privacy and data exposure.
Right. Privacy and data protection vulnerabilities. Yeah. This is where those fun viral trends really smash head on into some pretty severe realities, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We saw Nano Banana AI take off precisely because people were uploading very personal photos themselves, their kids, their partners, images maybe taken in sensitive places.
And every time you upload one of those personal photos, you are essentially handing over biometric data to the platform. Specific identifiers, maybe location info hidden in the metadata, even implied relationships between people in the photos. It's a massive potential exposure surface, even if the company has perfect, transparent data policies, which is, rarely the case in practice.
But the research you mentioned suggests the exposure might go even deeper than just the image that was uploaded.
This was probably the most alarming finding, yeah. Researchers found repeatable instances where the AI generated images that contain specific identifiable personal details. Things like birthmarks, scars, maybe moles, that were definitely not visible in the original photo the user uploaded. The strong inference there is that the AI model might have access to a much broader, potentially unacknowledged set of data sets. It could be cross-referencing information from, say, other parts of the user's history within Google's massive ecosystem search history, map data, who knows, to essentially fill in the blanks when it generates a new image.
Wow. That implies a kind of data breach, not based on what you chose to upload, but on algorithmic inference, like it's connecting dots you didn't even know were there.
Exactly. It turns what might seem like an innocent photo upload into a potential systemic privacy risk. It raises fundamental questions about data retention, about how much data minimization is really happening behind the scenes. And there's a critical policy distinction organizations need to grasp. Google generally offers enhanced, contractually defined data protection for its business and enterprise customers. Their content is supposed to stay within organizational boundaries, but for regular consumer users, the exposure is significantly higher. The policies are pretty clear that human reviewers can and sometimes do examine user content, ostensibly for quality control or model improvement. So for any individual using the free or consumer version, there's a very real, potentially quite dangerous trade-off happening between getting that cool creative output and the sheer depth of personal data they might be exposing.
Okay, so the risk of accidental data exposure is huge. But what happens when someone intends to cause harm? That takes us straight to prompt injection, right? The vulnerability that seems to plague every major large language model.
Yeah.
And Nano Banana AI, being so deeply tied into the broader Gemini system, Sounds like it's particularly vulnerable here.
Yeah, this vulnerability has been dubbed the targeted promptware attack, and it gets amplified because Gemini is multimodal. An attacker doesn't necessarily need direct access to the image editing interface itself. They can embed malicious instructions, often hidden, inside perfectly innocent-looking content. Think a Google Calendar invite, maybe an email subject line, a shared Google Doc, or even hidden within the invisible metadata of an image file someone shares with you.
And because users often rely on Gemini to summarize things or interact with content, like asking, hey, summarize this document and make me a nice thumbnail for it, the hidden malicious prompt gets activated without them realizing.
That's precisely the attack vector. The AI agent, just trying to be helpful, ends up executing the attacker's hidden instructions. And the range of these attacks is, frankly, worrying. We've seen demonstrations of short-term context poisoning that just affects the current interaction session. But the more sophisticated and honestly more alarming threat is long-term memory poisoning. This exploits a feature in Gemini called saved info, which allows users to store preferences or facts for the AI to remember across sessions. An attacker can potentially inject malicious instructions into this persistent memory. So the AI's behavior could be subtly altered, maybe dangerously so, across completely independent sessions, continuing until the user manually finds and clears out that specific piece of saved info.
You used the analogy digital vandalism earlier. That really hits home when you talk about these automatic agent invocation attacks. What kind of real-world consequences are we talking about if the AI gets manipulated like this?
We're talking about actions that can actually bridge the digital and physical worlds, potentially. Because the Gemini ecosystem can connect to other services, smart home devices via Google Home, linked calendars, email accounts, a successful attack could trigger tangible real-world actions. Examples, forcing the AI to create and send misleading calendar invites, maybe to competitors, or automatically opening sensitive documents found in Drive, summarizing the key contents, and drafting an email to an external address with that summary. Or even in a really highly integrated smart office environment, if the AI has been given the permissions, potentially trying to control things like lighting systems or even unlocking physical access points. The ability to coerce the AI into taking actions without the user's explicit, immediate permission, that turns it into a serious vector for data exfiltration, corporate espionage, even sabotage.
So that jump from a theoretical flaw to a real operational risk is.
Yeah, it's sobering. And finally, in this section on immediate risks, we have to talk about the most visible threat this kind of tech amplifies: the democratization of deception through deepfakes. Right. Nano Banana AI's capabilities seem almost perfectly tuned for generating hyper-realistic, convincing, deceptive content. Its unique strength, as we discussed, is maintaining that biometric consistency, the face, the identity, while being able to instantly and radically alter everything else. The context, the clothes, the background, the lighting.
Which lets bad actors create synthetic media that looks much more convincing, bypassing the sort of uncanny valley issues we saw with older deepfake methods.
Absolutely. And the list of potential criminal uses is unfortunately growing rapidly. We're already seeing concerns about creating highly fraudulent identity documents, fake passports, driver's licenses that might actually pass initial visual checks. There's the potential for generating misleading visual evidence for use in legal cases or political manipulation. And of course, producing incredibly sophisticated visual content specifically tailored for social engineering attacks. Imagine getting a perfectly realistic image of your CEO, maybe looking stressed in a specific location you know they frequent, asking for an urgent money transfer. It adds a terrifying layer of credibility.
And the sheer accessibility is the real force multiplier here, isn't it?
It really is. Because Nano Banana AI isn't some obscure tool needing expert skills. It's available through easy-to-use, consumer-friendly interfaces, often integrated right into the productivity suites people use every day. This dramatically lowers the technical barrier for creating high-quality deepfakes. What used to require specialized knowledge, maybe significant computing power or funding from state actors, is now accessible to basically anyone with a Google account. And that fundamentally accelerates the pace, the volume, and potentially the believability of misinformation and scams online.
That ease of use, accelerating the whole misinformation landscape, it flows perfectly into the next big challenge. What happens when this powerful, potentially dangerous tool enters the workplace, often without IT even knowing it's there? This whole shadow AI risk.
Exactly. The challenge of shadow AI, of unauthorized usage within the enterprise, it's reaching kind of an unprecedented level here. And that's because Nano Banana AI capabilities are being woven seamlessly directly into standard Google Workspace subscriptions.
Yeah, it's not like some external app you can just block at the firewall anymore. It's becoming an inherent feature of the tools people use daily.
Correct. And that seemingly convenient integration creates significant operational risk. Employees suddenly gain access to incredibly powerful image generation, modification, and even summarization tools, often without needing any special approval or oversight from the IT or security teams. Security pros are used to monitoring external apps, maybe controlling API access. Now they have to monitor the internal, potentially permitted use of a tool that can be easily abused either maliciously or just accidentally.
Mm.
It makes monitoring and actually governing AI usage within the company incredibly difficult.
And this risk isn't just theoretical, is it? I remember seeing data suggesting a significant chunk of employees, maybe up to 38% in some surveys, admit they've shared sensitive work information with AI systems without their employer even knowing.
That statistic should honestly send a chill down the spine of every CSO. Think about it. Employees inadvertently uploading proprietary product mockups, maybe confidential architectural blueprints, sensitive marketing campaign visuals, uploading them into a tool designed to rapidly edit, remix, and stylize images. They're potentially exposing that crucial company data to an external AI infrastructure, which leads us directly into the huge risks around data leakage and protecting intellectual property, or IP.
So, what are the main ways IP is at risk in this specific context? How does it leak out?
Well, there are two primary mechanisms to worry about here. First is what we could call output exposure and potential training data contamination. Sensitive business information, maybe unique visual branding elements, proprietary designs might get inadvertently incorporated into the AI's underlying training data sets if not handled correctly by the provider. Worse, imagine an employee uploads a confidential image, asks the AI to create variations, maybe for a presentation. Those variations, even if slightly altered, still contain the core proprietary visual elements. And if those outputs are stored externally or shared improperly, the IP has leaked.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second mechanism ties back to that huge context window Gemini has.
Exactly. The second big risk is exfiltration via contextual access. Remember, the system can access, summarize, and synthesize information across different linked Google Workspace apps like Gmail, Drive, Docs. This creates a really tempting attack surface. A sophisticated attacker, maybe using a clever prompt injection hidden in an email, could potentially coerce the AI agent to scan across an employee's entire workspace. Identify a high-value confidential visual asset, like a design file preview stored in Drive, and then use Nano Banana AI not to steal the original file, but to create a stylized, perhaps lower-resolution version of that asset. Something that looks innocent, like a concept sketch, but contains the core IP. Perfect for quick exfiltration, bypassing normal data loss prevention systems looking for specific file types.
Let me try to picture this. Say an engineer has a screenshot of a proprietary 3D CAD model, something top secret, unreleased. They upload it to Nano Banana AI and just ask it to, I don't know, make this look like a cool collectible toy package for a marketing brainstorming session.
Yeah.
What's the immediate IP danger there?
The danger is really threefold in that scenario. One, the raw pixel data representing your secret design has now left your company's secure network boundary. It's on Buell's servers. Two, the output itself, that toy package image, now contains your proprietary visual elements, maybe slightly altered, but still recognizable. And that output image is incredibly easy to share, email, drop into other documents, likely bypassing any data loss prevention DLP systems you have set up to detect, say, raw CAD files. And three, depending on the specifics of your enterprise agreement with Google, that unique visual IP derived from your input might now be sitting on their infrastructure, potentially complicating future IP defense arguments or ownership claims down the line. Honestly, organizations are really struggling to maintain control over sensitive visual assets when employees can so easily replicate, modify, or distribute them using these powerful integrated AI tools. The traditional idea of a secure network perimeter, it's effectively just dissolving right in front of us.
That shift. Wow. From keeping threats out to managing risk that's already inside your most common productivity tools, that feels like the fundamental cybersecurity challenge right now. And these enterprise risks, they demand immediate proactive strategy. Which brings us back to our resource recommendation. Remember, securing your organization against a threat that's now basically living inside your email and calendar. That requires specialized strategic guidance. You need to be proactive in setting policies for these AI tools before something goes wrong. So we strongly recommend you get connected with Sudiakar Kakinada on LinkedIn for a quick chat on how he can help you enhance your organization's cybersecurity to the next level of robustness. Whether it's drafting a new data classification policy for AI use or implementing technical safeguards against this shadow AI risk, getting expert help is really non-negotiable now.
Absolutely. And shifting gears slightly, these technological risks we've outlined, they get magnified significantly by the complex web of compliance and regulatory hurdles organizations now face. The legal landscape is running hard just to try and keep up with how fast AI is advancing.
Okay, let's start with the big one. GDPR, the EU's General Data Protection Regulation. It's kind of the gold standard for global privacy. How does Nano Banana AI immediately trigger GDPR concerns?
Well, the moment you process personal images, especially faces, you're processing biometric data and potentially inferring other sensitive personal information. That rings major alarm bells under GDPR. The standard for lawfully processing biometric data under GDPR is incredibly high. It generally requires explicit, informed consent, and you need the absolute highest level of security measures to protect it. Now remember that finding about the AI generating images with details not in the original photo, like birthmarks, that raises fundamental GDPR questions about the lawful basis for processing that inferred data, about the principle of purpose limitation, why was that inferred data needed, and about data minimization, was it necessary to generate or store that extra detail? It's a compliance minefield.
Yeah, for any company that serves customers in the EU, even if they aren't based there, they also have to deal with the global nature of Google's infrastructure, right? Data crossing borders.
Absolutely, that's a huge headache. Organizations have to navigate the complexities of data localization rules where data can physically be stored and ensure they have adequate legal mechanisms and protections in place for any personal data subject to cross-border transfers, especially after rulings like Schrems-Tisikin made certain transfer mechanisms invalid. Proper compliance demands rigorous, specific data protection impact assessments, or DPIAs, focused squarely on the generative AI workflow. You have to map out the risks from the moment data is uploaded through processing to when the output is generated and stored. And you need robust processes for handling data subject rights like the right to access their data or the right to erasure, the right to be forgotten, which, let me tell you, is notoriously difficult to implement perfectly when you're dealing with constantly evolving massive AI training models. How do you guarantee you've erased every trace?
Beyond GDPR, there's the EU AI Act looming, aiming to standardize AI safety and transparency across the board. How does that come into play?
Right. The EU AI Act classifies generative AI systems like Nano Banana AI as general purpose AI models, and it imposes specific transparency requirements. Critically, it mandates that any AI-generated content must be clearly and digitally labeled as synthetic. Users also have to be explicitly informed when they are interacting with an AI system versus a human. Furthermore, organizations deploying these systems within the EU will need to implement adequate human oversight mechanisms and maintain detailed technical documentation about the system's use, its limitations, and the risk assessments they've conducted.
Does Nano Banana AI itself fall into the high-risk category under the Act? That triggers even stricter rules, doesn't it?
Explicitly. Not necessarily, based purely on its function as an image editor. However, the risk is definitely latent there. While it might not currently meet the specific criteria for a high-risk classification, its widespread adoption combined with its powerful dual-use capabilities, especially that ability to create hyper-realistic deepfakes that could be used to influence elections or manipulate legal processes, might trigger enhanced regulatory scrutiny down the line. If regulators decide it could have a systemic impact, then organizations using it could face mandatory incident reporting requirements to the European Commission. The AI system itself would likely need exhaustive conformity assessments before being deployed in certain contexts. So preparing for that level of scrutiny is probably wise.
Okay, so that's Europe, but outside the EU, it's more of a patchwork, right? What other key regulations do global companies need to juggle simultaneously?
It's definitely a patchwork. In the United States, for example, there's no single federal AI law like the EU AI Act. Instead, organizations have to weave together compliance based on federal guidance, like the excellent NIST AI Risk Management Framework, which gives a solid structure for assessing and managing AI risks alongside a growing number of state-specific laws. California's Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA for instance, gives consumers rights over their personal information, including data that's insured about them. So if Nano Banana AI is inferring biometric data, the CCPA's right to know what's being inferred and the right to delete it become really relevant and technically very complex to implement for a generative model.
And what about key regions in Asia Pacific? Data localization seems like a big theme there too.
Yeah, APAC presents its own unique set of challenges. You see varying requirements across countries regarding data localization, insisting that data on their citizens be stored physically within national borders. There are also different demands for algorithmic transparency and mandatory auditing of AI systems. And we're seeing new frameworks emerge, like in India, potentially introducing specific requirements for getting AI models approved before deployment, plus content labeling rules similar to the EU's. The bottom line, the compliance overhead for using a globally accessible tool like this is becoming astronomical. It often forces multinational organizations to build their compliance programs around the strictest common denominator across all the regions they operate in.
This whole compliance landscape really underscores that just waiting for something to break isn't an option. Proactive defense is absolutely critical. So let's shift now to the practical strategies. What can security professionals actually do to mitigate these complex risks?
Okay, strategy. We absolutely have to start with the technical fundamentals. The biggest blind spot with AI often is just not knowing how it's being used. So comprehensive logging is the absolute first foundational step.
When you say comprehensive logging in the context of generative AI, what does that mean beyond just standard network access logs?
It has to be much more granular, multi-layered, really. Organizations need monitoring and logging systems that track not just who accessed the tool and when, but critically, the full context of their interactions. That means capturing the exact prompt the user entered, maybe a hash of the output image generated, the size of the context window they utilized if that's relevant, and crucially, the data access patterns involved. Did the AI touch sensitive files in Drive during that session? You need logs that can show attempts to use restricted data sources, maybe flag unusually high latency in generation requests, which could indicate complex prompt injection. Then you layer advanced behavioral analytics on top of those detailed logs. That's how you can start spotting anomalous usage patterns, or maybe detect sophisticated prompt injection attempts designed to slowly exfiltrate sensitive information over time. You simply cannot defend what you can't see, and you definitely can't audit what you haven't recorded properly.
And given that huge prompt injection risk we talked about earlier, strong input validations seems like it would have to be core to any defense strategy too.
Absolutely essential. Input validation and content filtering need to be implemented aggressively, probably at multiple points, maybe at the application gateway, or even via API controls if possible. This involves techniques like sanitizing input prompts, stripping out potentially malicious HTML tags, embedded code snippets, or those special delimiter characters attackers use to separate their hidden instructions from the user's legitimate request. And these controls can't be static. They have to be dynamic, constantly updated, because the techniques attackers use against these complex MOE and multimodal LLMs are evolving incredibly quickly.
Access control is always key, but how do you apply traditional role-based access control, RBAC, to a feature that's just built into Google Workspace for potentially everyone?
That really is the core enterprise challenge, isn't it? Traditional RBAC is good at limiting who can access an application. Here, we need to get much more granular and limit access to specific features within the application. Organizations need to explore and implement fine-grained RBAC models if their platform allows it. Models that can limit certain AI capabilities based on user roles, on documented business necessity, maybe on data sensitivity clearance levels. For example, maybe only users in the marketing department who have undergone specific training are allowed to use Nano Banana AI's features that connect to shared drives containing approved brand assets. Others get a more limited version. And crucially, mandatory multi-factor authentication, MFA, shouldn't just be for logging into Workspace. It needs to be enforced again before initiating any high-risk AI operation, especially those involving modifying sensitive data or asking the AI to summarize information from restricted sources. Add friction to the risky actions.
Okay, shifting toward protecting the data itself, data-centric protection. How can companies leverage AI's power while fundamentally shielding their crown jewels, their proprietary data?
This really starts with basic but critical discipline, strong data classification, and clear policies. Organizations must implement crystal clear data classification policies. Define exactly what types of data, visual assets, text documents, proprietary formulas are considered sensitive, confidential, or public. Then, define explicitly which classifications, if any, are permissible for use with any external AI tool, including integrated ones like Nano Banana. And this absolutely has to be backed up by mandatory approval workflows for using sensitive data with AI. An engineer shouldn't be able to just casually upload an unreleased product mockup without getting explicit sign-off from their manager, and maybe even legal or compliance, depending on the data's sensitivity.
You mentioned advanced privacy-preserving technologies earlier, like homomorphic encryption. That sounds almost like science fiction for security. How would that actually apply to something practical like using an image editor?
Right? It is cutting edge, but it's becoming more feasible. The goal is to decouple the utility of the AI from the exposure of the raw data. So, using homomorphic encryption, OGD, for example, an organization could theoretically take a sensitive, proprietary product image, encrypt the actual pixel data on their own servers, and then upload the encrypted image to Nano Banana AI. The magic, or rather the complex math of HE, is that the AI service could then perform the desired computation, say, changing the color palette, adjusting the depth of field, whatever the user requested directly on the encrypted pixel data. The AI processes the data, performs the edit, without ever seeing the raw, unencrypted proprietary image. The sensitive data never leaves the company's secure control in a readable format. Google never sees the unencrypted IP. The result comes back encrypted and is decrypted internally.
Okay, that sounds incredibly secure. Almost too good to be true. Let me push back a bit though for, say, 90% of organizations out there, the ones without huge budgets or dedicated cryptographic research teams. Is implementing something as complex and computationally intensive as homomorphic encryption actually realistic right now? Or is the only practical path forward just really rigid data classification and maybe basic encryption before upload?
That's a fair challenge, and it highlights the essential trade-off. For the vast majority of organizations today, especially small to medium businesses or those without deep in-house cryptographic expertise, yes, the most immediate and effective path is going to be that rigid data classification combined with strong policies, user training, and perhaps client-side encryption for highly sensitive files before they even get near the AI upload button. However, for larger enterprises, for those dealing with highly classified intellectual property, national security data, or extremely sensitive R&D, they really must start investing in piloting and understanding these advanced privacy-preserving technologies like HE or even secure multi-party computation. Why? Because ultimately, these are the only technical mechanisms that can provide a mathematical proof of privacy during computation, rather than just relying on policy and trust. Simple policy is good, necessary even. But provable privacy through cryptography is undeniably better for the highest stakes data. It's the future direction.
Okay, so technical controls are vital, but they only work if they're supported by strong governance and constant oversight.
Right. Absolutely. You can have the best tech in the world, but if the policies are weak or unenforced, it falls apart. Successful, safe AI integration demands comprehensive governance frameworks. We strongly advise organizations to establish standing AI governance committees. These shouldn't be ad hoc. They need representatives from key areas: security, legal, compliance, privacy, IT, and crucially, the core business units actually using the AI. This committee's job is ongoing. They oversee AI deployments, they define and refine acceptable use policies, they ensure alignment with ethical principles, and they conduct regular, dynamic risk assessments. Assessments that have to adapt every time Google pushes a new Gemini model update or adds a new feature. Governance has to be a continuous living process, not a one-time checklist.
And finally, wrapping up the mitigation section, there's the human element, training and having a plan for when things inevitably go wrong. Incident response.
Yep, the human layer is often the weakest link, but also potentially the strongest defense if empowered correctly. Comprehensive training programs are absolutely non-negotiable. Employees need education that covers the basics of data privacy rules, yes, but also the specific risks of social engineering amplified by AI. They need to understand how a perfectly convincing deepfake image or video could be used in a phishing attack. Training must cover appropriate usage guidelines, what they can and cannot do with tools like Nano Banana AI, and clear, simple, mandatory procedures for reporting suspicious activity or potential instance. And it's not just users. Security teams themselves need specialized training. They need to understand AI-specific vulnerabilities, model auditing techniques, how to recognize the signatures of prompt injection attacks and logs.
And the incident response plan needs to be adapted too, right? It's not just a standard data breach response anymore.
Exactly. Traditional incident response often focuses on containing a breach and restoring data from backups. AI incident response has to be broader. Your IR procedures need to specifically detail how to handle a data breach that might have resulted from AI inference, not just direct exfiltration. How do you investigate that? How do you isolate and remediate a suspected model poisoning attack? How do you respond if an employee misuses the AI internally, causing a privacy violation? And practice matters. Organizations must conduct regular, realistic tabletop exercises. These exercises need to incorporate scenarios involving AI, like a sophisticated prompt injection leading to IP exfiltration via generated images. Use these exercises to test coordination between security, legal, IT, and business units. Test your recovery protocols, which might now include not just data restoration, but the potentially complex and costly process of AI model retraining or fine-tuning to remove malicious influence or bias.
It's clear the threat landscape here isn't static. It feels like it's accelerating week by week. So looking ahead, what are the next wave of emerging attack vectors we should be bracing for, maybe over the next year or so?
Yeah, things are moving fast. First, I think we need to be increasingly wary of more insidious attacks like model poisoning. We touched on it, but it's worth emphasizing. AI models are vulnerable to having their training data subtly corrupted over time. Attackers might inject carefully crafted, malicious data, maybe slightly altered images, mislabeled examples during the training or fine-tuning process. The goal isn't necessarily immediate, obvious malfunction. It might be to cause the AI to produce specific unintended outputs only under certain conditions, or maybe to exhibit a long-term behavioral bias that benefits the attacker, something that might not be immediately apparent during standard testing. It's a slow, quiet form of sabotage targeting the AI's core functionality.
And it sounds like the defenses we're trying to build are themselves becoming targets.
That's the constant cat and mouse game, isn't it? Adversarial attacks on detection systems are a growing concern. Researchers have repeatedly demonstrated that the forensic classifiers designed to identify AI-generated images, the very systems meant to validate things like synthesized watermarks and help us counter deepfakes, can often be fooled. They can be defeated with minimal, sometimes visually imperceptible modifications to the synthetic image. Just changing a few pixels in the right way can sometimes trick the detector. This allows sophisticated synthetic content to potentially bypass automated security controls and evade detection, making manual human review the final line of defense. And humans, as we know, are fallible, especially when dealing with high volumes of content.
And scaling this up even further, how are sophisticated attackers, like state-sponsored groups, the APTs, likely to integrate these AI capabilities?
That's where it gets really serious. Advanced persistent threats, or APTs, are no longer just users of publicly available AI tools. They are actively integrating AI capabilities directly into their core attack methodologies and infrastructure. We can expect them to leverage AI-generated content for hyper-realistic spear phishing campaigns, targeted with incredible precision based on OSINT gathered by other AI tools. For generating synthetic data for espionage purposes, maybe creating fake personas or documents. For launching widespread, highly believable disinformation campaigns, and perhaps most concerningly, for attacks against critical infrastructure, potentially using AI-generated visuals or commands that blend in seamlessly with legitimate traffic, integrating tools like Nano Banana with other compromised enterprise systems to establish long-term, high-trust access deep within organizational networks.
Okay, looking even further out now, the sort of long-term, almost existential risk. Quantum computing. How does that potentially game-changing technology intersect with AI security and specifically things like the watermarking we discussed?
Quantum computing represents a fundamental, long-term threat to almost all the public key cryptography we rely on today. That includes the cryptographic algorithms likely underpinning systems like Google's synthesized watermarking. If, or perhaps when, practical, large-scale quantum computers become a reality, they could potentially break the encryption keys used in these systems relatively easily. That means those digital watermarks could potentially be removed, forged, or circumvented at scale, completely undermining our ability to reliably trace the provenance of AI-generated content using those methods. So, organizations, especially those dealing with long-term data retention or long lifecycle assets, need to start planning now for the transition to post-quantum cryptography, or PQC. Even though the exact timeline for fault-tolerant quantum computers is still uncertain, the planning needs to begin. We need to ensure the long-term confidentiality and integrity of our data, recognizing that the useful lifespan of visual assets, contracts, or IP often far exceeds the currently projected shelf life of our existing cryptographic defenses against a quantum adversary.
Wow. This entire deep dive really paints a picture of a technology that burst onto the scene as a fun viral trend and almost overnight became a core operational security and compliance risk for basically everyone. The speed of adoption seems to have completely outpaced traditional security planning cycles.
It really has. And that leads us right into the final provocative thought we wanted to leave you, the listener, with today. Given this incredibly rapid integration of powerful AI capabilities like Nano Banana directly into standard ubiquitous productivity suites like Google Workspace, the traditional comfortable line that used to separate an external cyber threat from an internal operational risk, that line has effectively vanished. It's blurred beyond recognition. The core challenge for security teams is no longer primarily about building bigger digital walls to keep the threats out. It's increasingly about managing the complex inherent risk that is now deeply woven into the fabric of our most common, most essential digital tools. So the question we leave you with is, what does the concept of a secure network perimeter even mean anymore when potentially the most powerful and potentially compromisable image editor on the planet can be accessed, invoked, and potentially weaponized through a shared calendar invite?
That really is the essential question, isn't it? The one every security professional, every business leader needs to be grappling with right now. Throughout this discussion, we've covered the absolute necessity of moving beyond reactive security postures. It requires proactive risk assessment tailored to AI, comprehensive policy development that anticipates misuse, and continuous adaptation, both technically and in terms of human awareness, to this incredibly fast-evolving threat landscape.
Yeah, adopting powerful generative AI like this safely isn't just about flipping a switch. It demands robust governance structures, ongoing targeted training, and deploying specialized technical controls specifically designed for the nuances of multimodal AI systems.
And to start getting a handle on securing your own organization against these shifting boundaries and rapidly evolving threats, please make sure you seek out specialized, expert guidance. You need help navigating this, developing those specific governance frameworks, figuring out the right technical deployment strategies for your environment. We strongly urge you, one last time, get connected with Sudhakar Kakinada on LinkedIn for a quick chat on how he can help you enhance your organization's cybersecurity to the next level of robustness. Thank you so much for joining us for this really crucial deep dive into the security implications of Nano Banana AI and what it signals about the future of enterprise risk.
Stay secure and stay tuned.